Picture an ancient human, tens of thousands of years ago. The air is cold, their body is bare, unprotected against the wind and the elements. And yet, around their neck, carefully strung on a length of sinew, hangs a row of small shells, each one deliberately pierced, chosen, and arranged. This person has not yet invented what we would call proper clothing, but they are wearing jewelry. And this simple, almost unbelievable fact contains one of the most profound mysteries in the entire human story. Because the evidence suggests that our ancestors were decorating their bodies with ornaments long before there is clear evidence of them wearing clothing for warmth or protection. In other words, humans may have wanted to look meaningful before they wanted to stay warm. They adorned before they covered. And the question is, why? Why would a vulnerable, exposed creature living in a harsh and dangerous world invest precious time and effort into stringing beads when that same effort could have gone toward survival? The answer reveals something astonishing about what it truly means to be human. Let us begin with the evidence, because it is genuinely remarkable and it is far older than most people imagine. Archaeologists have discovered small beads made from shells, deliberately pierced so they could be strung together, that are extraordinarily ancient, dating back into the deep past of the human story. At sites scattered across Africa and the Middle East, researchers have found these tiny perforated shells, some of them tens of thousands of years old, and in certain cases, considerably older still. These are not random shells. They show clear signs of deliberate modification, holes carefully made so they could be threaded, wear patterns showing they rubbed against string or against each other, exactly as beads on a necklace would. Some even show traces of pigment, hinting that they may have been colored. This is not accident. This is intention. This is design. And here is the crucial comparison. When we look for the earliest hard evidence of clothing, the picture is much murkier and, in many respects, appears later. Clothing, you see, is a problem for archaeology, because the materials that ancient humans would have used for clothing, animal hides, plant fibers, and the like, are organic. They rot. They decay. They rarely survive for tens of thousands of years, so we cannot simply dig up an ancient wardrobe. Instead, scientists have to get clever and look for indirect evidence. And one of the most ingenious lines of evidence comes from a very unexpected source: lice. Yes, lice. Human beings are host to different types of lice, and one of them, the clothing louse, or body louse, lives specifically in clothing. It is adapted to cling to fabric rather than to hair. So by studying the genetics of lice and estimating when the clothing louse diverged from the head louse, scientists can make an educated guess about when humans began wearing clothing regularly enough to create a whole new habitat for a specialized parasite. And these genetic studies suggest that regular clothing may be, in evolutionary terms, a relatively recent development. While the precise dates are debated and continue to be refined, this line of evidence, combined with the scarcity of early clothing tools, paints a fascinating picture. The deliberate creation of personal ornaments, of jewelry, appears to reach back at least as far as, and quite possibly further than, the clear evidence for habitual clothing. Now, we must be careful and honest here, as we always are. The archaeological record is incomplete. Clothing may well have been used earlier than the surviving evidence suggests, precisely because it does not preserve well. It is entirely possible that early humans draped themselves in hides for warmth long before they left traces we can find. So the claim is not that no human ever wore anything before they wore beads. The claim is subtler and, in some ways, even more interesting. It is that ancient humans invested extraordinary effort into symbolic decoration, into ornaments that served no physical protective purpose whatsoever, remarkably early in our story. Whether or not a particular group had figured out a fur cloak, they were making necklaces. And necklaces, unlike cloaks, do absolutely nothing to keep you alive. Which brings us back to the great question: why? To understand this, we have to grasp a distinction that sits at the very heart of what makes us human. There is a difference between things that help the body survive and things that carry meaning. A fur cloak keeps you warm. That is a survival function. But a string of pierced shells does not keep you warm, does not feed you, does not protect you from predators. Its entire purpose is symbolic. It says something. And the moment a creature begins to invest serious effort into objects whose only purpose is to carry meaning, to communicate, to signal, something revolutionary has happened in the story of life on Earth. A mind has emerged that lives not only in the world of physical needs, but in a world of symbols. And that, more than tools, more than fire, may be the truest signature of the modern human mind. So what exactly were these ancient ornaments saying? What meaning did they carry that was so important, so valuable, that people would craft them even before they reliably clothed themselves? Researchers have proposed several deeply intertwined answers, and together they reveal the social world of our ancestors in a startling new light. The first, and perhaps most important function of early jewelry was to signal identity and group belonging. Imagine the ancient social landscape. Humans lived in groups, and beyond your own group were others, some friendly, some potentially hostile. In such a world, being able to signal who you were and which group you belonged to carried enormous value. A particular style of shell necklace, a specific arrangement of beads, could function almost like a flag or a uniform announcing your membership in a particular community. When two people met, their ornaments could communicate before a single word was spoken whether they shared an identity, a kinship, a belonging. Jewelry, in this sense, was a wearable badge of who you were and where you belonged. And in a world where the difference between us and them could be the difference between safety and danger, that was information worth wearing. The second function, closely related, was to signal status and role within the group. Not all ornaments are equal. Some beads would have been harder to obtain than others. Shells from a distant sea, carried over great distances through trade or travel, would have been rare and precious. To wear such ornaments was to display that you had access to these rare things, that you had the connections, the skill, or the standing to possess them. Elaborate ornaments could mark out leaders, respected elders, skilled hunters, or individuals of special importance. In this way, jewelry became a silent language of social rank, allowing a person's place in the hierarchy to be read at a glance. And crucially, this kind of signaling works precisely because it is costly. A rare ornament is an honest signal, because not everyone can obtain one. The third function reaches into something even deeper, the realm of the spiritual, the protective, and the magical. Across countless human cultures, ornaments have been believed to carry power. Amulets to ward off evil, charms to bring good fortune, objects imbued with spiritual significance to protect the wearer or connect them to unseen forces. It is entirely plausible, indeed likely, that some of the earliest jewelry was worn not for social display alone, but out of a belief that these objects held protective or magical properties. A special shell, a particular stone, might have been thought to guard against harm, to bring success in the hunt, or to carry the essence of an ancestor or a spirit. In this light, the necklace was not mere decoration, it was a piece of the invisible world worn against the skin. And there is a fourth dimension, one that underlies all the others, the simple, profound human capacity for symbolic thought itself. To make and wear jewelry, a mind must be able to understand that one thing can stand for another, that a shell can represent belonging, that a bead can carry status, that an ornament can hold spiritual meaning. This capacity to let objects carry abstract meaning is one of the defining features of the human mind, and it is the same capacity that underlies language, art, religion, and everything else that makes our species unique. When ancient humans strung those first beads, they were exercising the very same mental power that would one day produce cave paintings, mythologies, and civilizations. The humble necklace is a monument to the birth of the symbolic mind. Now, step back and consider what all of this means when we place it against a puzzle of clothing. If ornaments carried all of this weight, identity, belonging, status, spiritual protection, symbolic meaning, then perhaps it is not so strange after all that humans adorned themselves so early, even before the clear evidence of habitual clothing. Because to an intensely social creature, living and dying by its relationships with others, the social and symbolic functions of jewelry may have been just as vital as physical warmth. In the human world, How you are perceived, which group you belong to, what status you hold, whether you are trusted. These things are matters of life and death. A human excluded from the group in the ancient world was a human in mortal danger. And so signaling your identity, your belonging, your value was not a frivolous luxury. It was survival of a different kind. Social survival. Symbolic survival. This reframes the entire question. We tend to assume that physical survival always comes first, that warmth and protection are the primary needs, and that decoration is a later luxury, an afterthought. But the deep history of our species suggests something more surprising. That for human beings, the symbolic and the social are not luxuries layered on top of survival. They are woven into the very fabric of what survival means for a creature like us. We are not merely bodies to be kept warm. We are social and symbolic beings, and the need to signal meaning, to declare who we are and where we belong, runs astonishingly deep, perhaps as deep as the need for warmth itself. Consider, too, what jewelry requires to make. To create even a simple shell necklace demanded a remarkable sequence of steps. First, the raw materials had to be gathered, sometimes shells from far away, obtained through travel or exchange. Then each shell had to be carefully pierced, a delicate task requiring skill and the right tools, one that could easily shatter the shell if done wrong. Then they had to be strung, arranged, ordered. This was not idle work. It took time, effort, planning, and craft, precisely the resources that, in a harsh world, were most precious. And our ancestors chose to spend those precious resources on objects that did nothing to keep them alive, but everything to declare that they were alive, and who they were. That choice speaks volumes about the kind of creature we had become. There is something deeply moving in this, when you truly consider it. Imagine a human, tens of thousands of years ago, in a world without writing, without cities, without any of the comforts we take for granted, a world that was often cold, dangerous, and unforgiving. And in the midst of that struggle, this person sits down, gathers a handful of small shells, and painstakingly, lovingly makes something beautiful, something meaningful, not because it will keep them warm, not because it will fill their belly, but because it says something, because it connects them to their people, to their beliefs, to their sense of who they are. In that act, we see the human spirit in its purest form, the refusal to live by bread alone, the insistence that life must have meaning, and that meaning deserves to be worn, displayed, and shared. So the next time you see a piece of jewelry, a necklace, a ring, a bracelet, understand that you are looking at one of the oldest human traditions of all, older perhaps than clothing itself, a tradition that reaches back to the very dawn of the symbolic mind, to the first moment a human being looked at a small shell and saw in it not food, not a tool, but a meaning. Our ancestors adorned themselves before they covered themselves because they understood something we sometimes forget, that to be human is not merely to survive, but to mean, that we are creatures who hunger not only for warmth and safety, but for identity, for belonging, for beauty, and for significance. And that hunger, written in pierced shells across tens of thousands of years, is perhaps the most human thing about us. We were symbolic beings before we were comfortable ones. We wore our meaning before we wore our warmth. And in those ancient beads, strung by hands long turned to dust, we can still see the unmistakable glimmer of ourselves. If this changed how you think about something as simple as a necklace, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below and tell me which part surprised you most. And if you want more of this, subscribe to Simply Odd. A new video drops every week. The next one might explain something you have wondered about your whole life without ever knowing what to ask.